We are putting this webinar on together in partnership with the Sierra Club Tahoe Area Group and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. And this is our free monthly webinar series, but we always appreciate donations. So if you feel so inclined, the link to donate is in the chat. All right, so today's webinar features Axel Hunnicutt with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. Axel is a wildlife biologist and manager who has worked across countries and continents with various large carnivores. And as the state gray wolf coordinator for California Department of Fish and Wildlife, he leads the state's efforts in gray wolf conservation management, recovery, and research. If you have any questions, feel free to add them into the chat and we'll ask them during the Q&A. We ask that you stay muted during the presentation. And before we get started, wolves are a contentious issue. We understand there's a lot of feelings and emotions on both sides of the issue. So we'll be addressing questions that are productive and respectful. And with that, Axel, take it away.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Thank you, Emily, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate the invitation to come and speak. Yeah, I am going to, let me get my presentation rolling here and then I will continue. Cool, so yeah, let me not leave you on alert here, put myself in the corner. I've been the wolf coordinator for the state for over 2 years now. I've spent like Emily said, most of my career across other parts of the world working with large mammals, particularly carnivores, particularly in Africa. And today I'm going to walk through kind of the first decade and a bit of wolf recovery in California, what we've learned, what challenges we faced, and what the future might hold. And also note that, the Sierra Nevada play a significant role in their recovery. So yeah, let's dive into it. Okay, so in order to talk about the more present information, we have to go back a little bit and look at the past. So wolves were, prior to humans, were the species that had the largest range, mammal that covered nearly all northern latitudes. Humans are, really the mammal that displaced them. So wolves occurred, across large chunks of North America, probably the vast majority of it, including California. And following like much of the Western states, wolves were extirpated from California by the 1920s. This is following, large-scale efforts by the federal government, by state, counties, and others to make myself a little smaller there. To remove wolves for, livestock, public safety, various concerns. But yeah, so wolves were the last wolf, as you can see there, was removed from Southern California in 1922 in San Bernardino, and then Lassen County in 1924. Those were the last official records of wolves in the state. And it wasn't till wolves were, fast forward a generation, and with the environmental movement in the 60s and 70s, the passing of the Endangered Species Act, wolves became a flagship species for reintroduction. And that reintroduction came in the early to mid 90s, with wolves being very famously reintroduced into Yellowstone National Park and central Idaho. And very quickly, wolves, as we'll talk about here, wolves are very good at dispersing long distances. And when given protections, their populations rebound quite quickly. And so it did not take very long for wolves to make their way into northeastern Oregon. And then by 2011, a very famous wolf, a radio-collared wolf, OR7, made his way down into California. And he was the first wolf on record since that last wolf was killed in Lassen County in 1924. And so to this day, wolves remain endangered both federally and under the California Endangered Species Act. Wolves that are here walked here, as we'll talk about in a little bit. And the state has never reintroduced or moved wolves around the state. They've come here naturally, and we are just simply trying to host their conservation. and presence. And so at that time when OR7 came in the early 2010s, the state got some stakeholders together, developed a working group, and developed a conservation plan. Now, this plan outlines, a variety of things, but one of the things is phases of wolf recovery, and that basically ties number of animals to different options for management that can be done within the state. And so a very key term here is breeding pair. So a breeding pair is an adult male and an adult female that have at least 2 pups that survive until December 31st. This is a term that is used in California. It's used across Western states to track recovery. So rather than just saying there's this number of packs, there's this number of wolves, they cover this amount of area, we use breeding success, reproductive success as the main metric to track wolf recovery. And so using this, that group in 2012 and onwards developed a plan that came up with these 3 phases. And so as you'll see, we have had at least 4 breeding pairs for 2 consecutive years up until January of last year, or rather, we had less than 4 breeding pairs. We met the criteria for phase 2 last year, and so in January we moved into phase 2. And you can see some of the things there is that we said that we were going to review the status of the species. It would potentially open the door for some more aggressive hazing techniques to mitigate conflict. And that also it might open the door to lethal removal in certain circumstances, which I'll talk about later. And so the main question that we're asked is, how many wolves are there? We get asked this all the time, and you'd think it'd be a simple question since there's less than 100, but that makes it all the more difficult. As any wildlife biologist will know, counting animals or trying to figure out how many animals there are is an age-old question. And so we use a variety of metrics here. You can see the blue lines there are the annual minimum reproduction. So that's the minimum number of pups that we have recorded for the year, for each of those years. You can see an annual maximum population. We don't necessarily track that, but basically we always look back and say, well, what was the highest count that we had at any given time? But the most accurate count and the count that we use to officially track the population is the year-end count. So because that lines up with that breeding pair number as December 31st, the end of the year, we look back and we try to determine how many what is the minimum count that we have. For 2025, that number will come out very soon. I can say that it is probably not going to be too much different than last year's. However, there was still growth. So that number will come out in our annual report, which should come out in a couple of weeks. This is our map. We put out a map every quarter. So we just finished a quarter yesterday. So we'll have a map coming out in a week or two here, or hopefully in a week or two. But this is the map as of December 2025. You can see that we have 9 packs. Those are those orange blobs. And then we have 4 areas of wolf activity. And so areas of wolf activity or I guess maybe I should define pack instead. A pack is an area where we have at least 2 wolves that are traveling together and use the same space. And they have to meet one of 2 criteria. They have to either reproduce. So if we have confirmation that they've given birth to pups, they will immediately become a pack. Or if we can confirm that they have at least 4 confirmed records together in a certain area or in a designated area within 6 months, a 6-month period, will also make them a pack. So some of those packs are just 2 animals. Some of them are animals that have been reproducing for years. For instance, the Lassen pack is reproduced for 10 years now. Areas of wolf activity is where we have at least 2 wolves, but they don't meet either of those 2 criteria yet. So they're sort of packs in waiting. This is the same map, but just with some counts from mid-year last year, just to give you an idea of kind of the variety of group size that we have. So this is not an official count by any means, and a lot has happened. But you can see here how, for instance, the whaleback pack, 6 adults, they had 10 pups last year. That's That's a tied record for the species. I don't think there's ever been a record of 11 in wolves, but there's been plenty of 10s. But still, 10 for a single female is quite a bit. And you can see there's a number of animals or a number of groups that are just made up of two animals. Now, that could be some of those are related, some of them are just young animals, some of them are ones in just areas that we've struggled to keep track of them. The other thing that I want to note here is just that you'll see on the right here, the Ulumni pack, which is down in the South Sierra. That pack did experience an outbreak of sarcoptic mange last year, which likely caused several mortalities. It likely or potentially attributed to the lack of reproduction that we had this last year. And so basically, this is just to highlight how disease and these small events can really have an impact on what is still a relatively small and fragile population. Now, that map took me about 10 minutes to make an arc, but it is the result of, literally hundreds of staff hours, maybe thousands over the years, tens of thousands of miles driven, whole bunch of survey work. A lot of people ask, do we actually see wolves quite a bit? Some of us do, but still it's not a lot. Most of our work is very much done on the non-invasive side. We use non-invasive techniques as sort of the main way to monitor wolves. And you can see here's a video of a wolf walking by, and we have scent marked that rock that he urinated on, and he peed on it, and basically we're able to go back, swab the rock, take that soil. We do a lot of scat collection, and we have a great team at our wildlife forensics lab, which is through our law enforcement division. There's Aaron and Jillian, our two wildlife forensics specialists, and there they are going through a whole bunch of wolf poop. Although the ones in the foreground looks like those might be coyote scats. No, sorry, those are pup scats, which we'll get to. But anyways, that allows us to uniquely identify individuals across the state, which is a lot more accurate than us just trying to do that from camera traps. Those individual IDs obviously go through their lifetime. We work with our neighboring states, Nevada, Oregon. We also work with the University of Idaho to track wolves on a regional basis. But that number allows us to track a minimum number of wolves and adds to that minimum count. And so to date, we have detected 169 wolves throughout the state. 165 of those have been through genetics. I say 169. Wolves typically live to 6 or 7 years of age. So many of those animals have likely passed. A lot of those detections are from previous years. But in total, we have 169 unique IDs that we can go through and confirm and check back in with. That eventually, helps us get down to helping deploy tracking collars on wolves. Wolves use very large areas in California, sometimes up to or exceeding 800 square miles for a single pack, which is enormous. And so being able to uniquely ID wolves within each of those areas helps us to distinguish different groups, especially because at these latitudes, wolves come in gray or black. We don't get white wolves this far south. And so you essentially could have gray, gray, black, black, or gray, black if you have two wolves together. And so that can initially help you parse out different packs, but really it's the genetics that helps us uniquely say, yeah, this group has been in this particular area. So getting collars on wolves is very helpful for us in getting a lot of different data, helps us determine those home ranges, helps us share information with livestock producers, helps us share information that can find livestock conflict and help us actually confirm when wolves have killed livestock. And it helps with a variety of monitoring, different population metrics that we use for monitoring. So actually putting collars on wolves can be quite a difficult thing, depending on the method you use. Like I said, wolves use enormous areas. And so actually going out and finding them to try to capture can be quite difficult. You can see this graph shows the variety of wolves that we've collared by year by pack. And so you can see those blue colors were originally the Lassen pack, And then as different packs came into existence, we were able to get collars on various ones. You can see in 2025, last year, we had an enormous success in terms of going from 1 to 5 animals a year captured to 18. And that is owed to the fact that we have started using helicopters. Helicopters are immensely helpful in that if we have a single wolf or at least one wolf collared in a group, we can send the helicopter to then follow that wolf and more safely and more effectively catch more wolves. And so you can see there, 2018 we caught, or sorry, 2025 we caught 18 wolves. The vast majority of those were by helicopter. And same thing with this year so far. We also started doing some early winter helicopter captures. We do the majority of the captures during winter. Temperatures are lower. Hopefully there's snow, which can help slow the animals down, and it's also safer for them as well. So over the course of the last 10 years, we have, or 9 years that we've been collaring, in total, we've collared 36 wolves. To date, there are about 10 or 12, depending on who's coming in and out of the state. There's about 11 wolves that are actively collared in the state. And it's, oh, sorry, I do have a video here. This is from this last January Harvey captures, just to give you an idea of a wolf that's safely recovering in Venezuela there. And we release those animals on public land, ideally as close as we can get to where they were caught by the helicopter. And they usually regroup with the rest of their mates, within the night. So now, collared wolves are probably the most effective way for us to, at least with a small population, track reproduction. And so if we have collars on wolves, we will eventually, especially if they're on the breeding females, it'll help us locate dens. And what we'll do is we will probably, well, actually, some of the wolves are starting to den now. This is about the time that they would give birth, is this early springtime. They will eventually vacate those dens and start using rendezvous sites. And when they do that, we're able to go in and collect the scat. So this is from one of our county wolf liaisons up in Siskiyou County. He's been immensely helpful in helping us get pup numbers for the whaleback pack. And so this is one way that we can do this is we can use camera traps, and through a variety of his videos, we've been able to determine that we had 5 blacks and 5 gray pups, and then we were able to go back into that site. And this is us walking around, and we're not this fast, but this is us running around collecting all of the hair and small pup poops that are there. And you'll see there that's the inside of that den for that particular year was a hollowed out log. That's where they probably gave birth or at least sought shelter. And so from that, we're able to then get the unique genetic ID of each one of those animals. And that then helps us track the population and track if 2, 3, 5 years down the line, a wolf pops up in another part of the state, we're able to take that individual ID from genetics and say, yeah, that animal was born at this location this year, and this is its parents. So we can gradually track who they are. So reproduction, I mentioned a little earlier. You can see this last year, we did have a small dip in, this is again, minimum reproduction. This is just what we're able to record. So a lot of this is, again, based off animals with collars. It is possible that next year or this year, we will find that there was a group of wolves that gave birth last year that we didn't know about. That is just an inherent issue of an increasing population all the time. You can see the orange bars there are litters. So that's the number of individual litters we've had. And so in total, we've had 144 pups born in the state. We've had 26 total litters. And on average, there's about 5.5 animals per litter. So that's the litter size. Now, like I mentioned, the highest we've had was last year, the whaleback pack, which had 10 pups in a litter. And we've had a variety of litters that have been only 1 or 2 as well. So 144 pups is quite a bit. A lot of those animals likely do not survive. Wolf survival rates can vary quite a bit. Uh, there's a study that just came out in Voyageurs National Park that showed that basically less than 30% of wolves survive, less than 30% of wolf pups survive their first year. And so, yes, there's 144 that was confirmed to be born. It's likely that a large percentage of those are no longer alive. And that's just the reality of being a wolf. Dispersal. So, yeah, once wolves grow up and they get to be a year or likely 2 years of age, they get kicked out, or not, they don't get kicked out, but they have an inherent drive to leave their natal pack. So a wolf pack is largely made up of an adult male and adult female, a breeding group that has pups, and usually it's the last 2 years of litters. So they have yearlings and they have pups for that year. Now sometimes you do get you know, a estranged uncle or a pup that wants to stay. So you do get these larger groups that can occur in areas like Yellowstone or northern Canada and Alaska. But that really is where there's a lot of competition between wolves going on, and also there's a lot of big game. And so it's advantageous for them to have larger packs. But by and large, our packs in California tend to be on the smaller size. Um, and so, anyways, what drives recovery and what drives wolf success, this is the machine of it that's behind it, is this dispersal behavior, this behavior to leave and try to seek out another mate. This is the diamond pack from Plumas County. These are two wolves that dispersed from Lassen County. Um, but over the years, so the first 10 years, a lot of the recorded dispersals were from animals that were collared in Oregon and came down into California. So you can see this is the basically the first 7 or 8 wolves that came down from Oregon over the years between 20, I didn't put or 7 in there, but between 2015 and 2021, nope, 2023. One of them you could see very famously was OR93. That was this wolf that went down through Lake Tahoe, went over close to Mono Lake, basically cut across Yosemite, down across close to Fresno, and then ended up in San Luis Obispo area before he eventually was hit by a vehicle in Kern County. So that wolf had traveled quite a distance. OR7, the wolf that I talked about earlier, he had literally traveled thousands of miles. And so you could see how wolves that were, reintroduced to Idaho could very quickly cover a huge amount of ground. In some of the, we've had some recent dispersal behavior that, for instance, in February, there was a wolf from that Ulamni pack that went down to Los Angeles County, which is the furthest we've recorded wolves officially in the state, and the furthest that they've been recorded since their reintroduction to the Central Rock or the Northern Rockies. So the point is, this is a key mechanism to recovery and to conservation within wolves. And so you can see here that on average, we get usually 2 or 3 wolves minimum detected from Oregon each year. So we continue to have wolves coming down from Oregon that add to not just the population, but the genetic diversity of the population. You can see in recent years, we've had California dispersers, so animals born in California going to other states. That's either going back into Oregon, and we have had a couple at least temporarily go into Nevada as well. And then we have an increase in internal dispersers or intrastate dispersers. Those are animals that are born in California and disperse to other parts of California to establish new packs or try to establish new packs. And so you can see that that has been increasing over the years, showing that the population continues or is starting to be internally subsistent. If we stopped having the Oregon dispersers come down, if suddenly a wall was formed across the northern boundary or around the boundaries of California, it's likely that California's population would persist internally by itself. So these dispersals are something that normally we would just report on later in reports, but this is something that we have on our website. It's a wolf tracker map. So from those GPS collars, there are the rough locations of wolves are shown every morning, or basically as they update. And you can see here how you could scroll over these highlighted hexagons, which are roughly 36 square miles. Um, and the point of this map, it was ideally to try to share information with livestock producers across the state, so they had an idea of where collared wolves are, because that's something that our staff do, is share that information every morning, particularly clusters where wolves have clustered in a certain spot that could potentially be a livestock kill. And so because of this map, one unintended consequence is that you can see when the wolves are dispersing. And so that is something that happened this winter. Folks were able to see a wolf that traveled down through Truckee and close to Reno. That wolf eventually did go back into Lassen County. And then, like I mentioned, that wolf that traveled down through into LA County as well as a variety of other ones. But the point is, this is a tool now that can engage the public beyond the people that actually live where wolves are. One consequence that I mentioned about dispersing such long distances is the longer you're on the road, the longer you're on the road, and that means that wolves can suffer mortalities as they disperse. They're often, or most often, traveling alone. It can be difficult for them to feed themselves, but also, particularly as they cross different parts of California, they're encountering a huge amount of infrastructure, particularly roadways. And so mortalities are something that does occur very much during that dispersal time. So the number of actual known mortalities in the state is not, and I am realizing this is not an updated number. That number for 2025 should actually be 12 animals. So I apologize. But the point is that last year we did have the highest record of known mortalities. Part of that is because we have had more collars on, so we're able to track wolf mortality. Another is just that we've had a variety of I think there were just more mortalities. And you can see that there's a variety of different legends in that column there for vehicle collisions. You can see over the year there's a number of unlawful takes. There are several that are still under investigation. And then this year in 2025 was the first time that the agency was responsible for removing wolves as well. And so, 12 wolves were removed last year, or not removed. 12 wolves were known to have died last year, which is quite significant in the numbers that we looked at for the minimum counts. That's 15 or so percent, if not more, of the minimum population. And so the point is that remains a huge issue. Some of these things, as in terms of unlawful take, vehicle collisions, some of these that are under investigation will likely come back to at least partially being attributed to disease like sarcoptic mange. And so there's a variety of pressures that are still on the population. But that does bring me to probably what is the most significant challenge to wolf management, but also wolf recovery and conservation in the state, and that's conflict with livestock. If wolves did not kill livestock, we probably wouldn't be here. They probably wouldn't be as contentious of a species. They likely wouldn't have been removed in the first place. It does lead to a significant portion of the time and effort that it takes to actually manage and monitor wolves, is the fact that their conflict with livestock is quite significant. And so this is something that it is very real. It is a very real threat for wolves, and it's a very real threat for and concern for the ranchers that live in the areas that cohabitate with wolves. There's not a single pack in California that does not overlap with an agricultural area, at least in some way. And some of them overlap quite significantly. And so this is one that can come at significant financial, emotional, and other costs to people, the actual Californians that are living in areas where wolves are. Wolves, we don't have a Yellowstone where wolves can just live happily in without conflict. Most of our national parks are relatively small, and given the size of the packs in California in terms of the area that they use, even if wolves did establish themselves in Kings Canyon or Yosemite, it's very likely that they would only partially overlap with those fully protected areas. And so wolves, by and large, exist on the working lands landscape in California. They occur largely in national forests, but then a lot on private land, private timber. And when I say working lands, I mean that these are areas that are also there not just to be forests and public lands or private lands, but they are there to produce timber, for harvesting timber. They're there for being used for livestock as well, where cattle, sheep are often on open range and allotments that is part of the fire and forest management of these areas. And so wolves occupy these areas and consume a lot of livestock. Um, you can see these numbers here. This is the number of livestock investigations that us and our partners have done. The majority of these investigations are actually done by USDA, Wildlife Services, and their agents. But you can see the number of confirmed and probable losses, that orange bar, that is the number of livestock killed, confirmed to be killed each year by wolves. And you can see last year, numbers just shot up quite a bit. I mean, exponentially. Nearly 200 confirmed kills by wolves last year. We did not see a population spike that aligned with that. Obviously, wolves, numbers of packs have been increasing, but the amount of conflict continues to grow. It's not perfectly uniform with population growth. Now, a part of that is that over 90 of those 197 were from a single pack, the BAM Sale pack, and that was in the Sierra Valley area. Sierra Valley is in the North Sierra. It's a valley in Sierra and Plumas counties, and there's a pack there called, or there was a pack there called the BAM Sale pack, that was basically had zeroed in on livestock in that area and was using them, I want to say, almost nearly exclusively for their diet. And so I just want to talk about that briefly because that's something that did happen last year. In response to this, our director at the time implemented what he was calling a strike team. Strike team was made up of wardens and biologists that were out there 24/7, alongside the livestock producers, ranchers, and residents that were there as well, that were also assisting and up at all hours. And so between June and October, our teams were out there and they were authorized to use less than lethal rounds. That's like beanbag rounds, rubber bullets, basically trying to use everything possible to deter wolves from making kills on livestock. And despite throwing literally the kitchen sink of non-lethal techniques at this situation, we still saw an increase of livestock kills over that time. And we even had a drone team, or several drone teams there as well from USDA, folks that came down from Oregon that have used unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, or drones to try to chase wolves off of cattle. Despite all that effort, we did have to make the difficult decision to remove that pack. And so, unfortunately, that situation did end with the removal of the adults in that group. A total of 4 animals were removed. One pup that was one younger animal that was misidentified during the removal, and then the 3 collared adults. And so, this was a difficult thing, but it's an unfortunate reality that, like I said, wolves kill livestock. They kill livestock in California. They kill livestock in Montana. They kill livestock in Europe, in India, in all places that exist. This is the main conflict with wolves is with livestock, and it goes back to 500 years ago, and it goes back thousands of years ago. It's why we have the dog breeds that we have. It's why we have those livestock guardian dog breeds, those shepherd dog breeds that occur all throughout Europe. This has been something that humans have been dealing with wolves as conflict between 2 species in their existence for millennia. And it is something that is panning out in California in ways that I think are more significant than we've seen in other places in the West. Part of conflict is compensation, and compensation doesn't mean that we're just paying people off. It's acknowledging that there is real financial loss that comes with having wolves on the landscape. A lot of that obviously is livestock loss, but some of it is the things that we ideally would like people to be doing to try to limit livestock loss. And so A compensation program was initiated back in 2021 when the state legislature allocated $3 million to start a pilot program. And so a pilot program was started in 2022 after a stakeholder group came together to draft what that would look like. And so this framework that they came up with was three-pronged. It was funding direct loss. You can see that's that blue line here on top. The direct loss is when you have a confirmed or probable kill. That's reimbursing for the cost of that animal. There's the second prong, which is the reimbursement of non-lethal tools. Individual livestock producers or operations that want to try different things or things that they're already doing, reimbursing them for the financial cost that bears. And then the last one is, you see it's P for P, that's pay for presence. In addition to the direct loss that wolves can have on livestock, there's also indirect loss. Just the presence of wolves in an area there's ongoing research on this that can reduce pregnancy rates, it can reduce total weight at market, and a variety of other things. And the point is to try to compensate for those losses as well. This is not unique to California. Every state has some sort of compensation program that has wolves. There's also a federal program as well. And so, yeah, this is something that California has come up with. We do have some continuing funding here for direct loss. And in total, the pilot program distributed $3 million, and to date, we've distributed $600,000 since we've started this new program. And we are currently in the process of, updating this program to try to learn from that pilot program and better figure out how to spend the $2 million as well as hopefully additional funds that will come in the future. So I am almost done here. I'm just going to wrap it up with a little bit of research, which I'm not going to go into too much depth on. We've been collecting data on wolves for over 10 years now, as you just saw through the presentation, through some of the key points. We have had a variety of smaller research projects, but in 2023, we realized it was time for something more comprehensive. And so we were able to find some funds to fund a collaboration with the University of California, Berkeley. They started the California Wolf Project. And from the state wildlife or the state wolf management plan and conservation plan that we have and the needs at the time, we came up with these 7 very broad objectives that range from, getting an better ecological understanding of wolves and their current environment to how they interplay with humans and obviously some of the depredation and conflict stuff as well. And so I would encourage you to visit their website if you want to know more about the California Wolf Project. But this has been probably the largest push that we've had. And I think that they've done a phenomenal job in answering a lot of these questions with us. And this is something that, really I think is going to help us when it comes to creating updates to our management plan, new documents. Ideally we would use this most up-to-date information that comes specifically from California to guide conservation for wolves into the future. And just to give you a rough idea, this is just some preliminary stuff. On the left is a suitability model for wolves. This is something the California Wolf Project has been working on. That suitability model is also helping us map where we see wolf populations going in the future and how quickly they could get there. And then on the right, you can see this is a map of modeling colonization, where we might see packs in the future and over what time period. And then we take that one step forward to then look at livestock in those various areas of northeastern California, and basically looking at what communities could there be issues, kind of like what we have in Sierra Valley, where there's a lot of conflict. And so you could see that we've modeled some areas there of where we might want to be thinking ahead in terms of conflict to try to usher wolves in the least conflict ways possible. And so if you are interested in more information, we do regularly post stuff on our website. I've put that there. Like I said, we did just finish out a quarter, January through March. And so we will be updating our maps, putting out new quarterly documents. And yeah, I guess I'll leave it there. I'll just say that, this wolf population relatively, compared to other Western states is still small. And but that does not mean that a small amount of wolves, can't have a huge impact on the humans in the areas that they live in, particularly on the conflict side. And it's critical for us, or at least for the time being, conflict with livestock and in rural communities is going to remain a key concern, and probably the key concern as it relates to both the humans in those areas and the wolves. And so while debates and challenges will persist, what's clear is that ongoing collaboration, thoughtful policy, and sustained investment from all stakeholders is going to be key to navigating what is the unfolding story of wolves in California. So I thank you very much.
Amazing. Axel, thank you so much for that presentation. It's really just fascinating and insightful. Um, Before we get into questions, once again, we just invite everyone to contribute to the Sierra Nevada Alliance to help keep these monthly webinars free and accessible to all. So please visit sierranevadaalliance.org/donate to help protect the Sierra now and for the future. And the link to donate is in the chat as well. At this time, if anyone has any questions or comments, please add them into the chat. But we do have some questions lined up. So first, I'm just asking, do you know about the travel patterns or reintroduction of wolves in Minnesota and Wisconsin?
No, no, I don't. Sorry.
All right.
Yeah,
Next.
one of our wolf specialists in Northern California did come from that area, and so he would be well versed in it.
Okay.
But yeah,
Gotcha. And then quickly, can you remind us the number for active collared wolves that was stated earlier in California at the moment?
yeah, I think I said 11. I'd want to double check that just to make sure one of those wolves didn't go into Oregon this morning. But
Hmm.
yeah, I think 11. And I say that as like it changes every day. One, because there are some wolves that have been going in and out of Oregon into California and back. And so when you look on our public map, we are only sharing data that's within the California border. So you'll see that those animals, won't always appear. And then the second thing is that the collars are imperfect. Um, as far as we've come with technology, I mean, like the fact that I have like all of human information at my fingertips, we're still, wildlife are hard on collars. And so, some of them die. Like we had a collar die 2 weeks ago in the whaleback pack. So that number might be down to 10. And then the ice cave pack had a collar that came online for 2 days and then came off. So point is that that is a fluctuating number.
Right. Next question we have is what can be shared about the route that members of the Yulumni, sorry, pack used to establish themselves so far south? And do we know which pack those wolves originated from? And are they genetically diverse enough to overcome the challenges of disease that mange you were talking about?
Yeah. So the Yolandi pack was a surprise in the sense that, a wolf pack popped up 100 miles, hundreds of miles south from the next nearest one in Tulare County. Genetically, we were able to figure out that pack, or the two adults in that pack, one was from the Lassen pack, the male, and the female was from the Rogue pack in southwestern Oregon. That female actually died last year. She was quite elderly. She was over 10. She was 10 or over 10 years old, which is sort of the max for a wolf. Um, but yeah, so the route that they took is unknown because they weren't only collared once they got down to Tulare County and we detected them. But I think what we can infer from it is that the Sierra Nevada remain sort of a highway, a key dispersal highway for wolves. Uh, from what we've seen from other collared wolves, as you saw on that one map, Other collared wolves from Oregon have used the Sierra Nevada as a highway for dispersal. It is a path of least resistance, not topographically, but at least in the sense of being away from humans and being away from road networks and whatnot. And so, yeah, that is one thing. And that is probably why we have wolves where we have them, right? They're in northeastern California. Ideally, they'd be in northwestern California, where there's a lot more public land, there's a lot more deer, there's a lot more elk, there's a lot less cattle. Um, However, where if you look at where wolves, if you bring up Oregon's map, where Oregon wolves are, you could see where it makes sense, where wolves were coming from northeastern Oregon, they worked their way down the Cascades, they come through eastern Siskiyou and Modoc counties, and so they occupy everything northeast of the Sierra and the Cascades, or at least the North Sierra. And then they've been dispersing, following down the Sierras again, and hitting what's at the bottom there? Sierra Valley. What's south of there? No other wolf packs that we know of. However, the next most southern one is the Yolumne group, and so yeah, it makes sense that they likely followed those paths, namely the mountains, which for this group is an argument for continuing to protect the Sierra. So I don't know,
And
maybe I missed something in that if multi-part question, but yeah.
yes, one more part to it. Is that pack genetically diverse enough to come
Oh yeah.
over some disease challenges? I know you'd mentioned mange impacting that pack pretty significantly.
Yeah. I don't know if yeah, I mean genetic diversity is important for a variety of things. For mange, I don't know how important it is unless they were already inbred in some way. From what we've seen, that group, like I said, they did not breed last year, or they did breed, but they had an unsuccessful litter. Um, there is a new female in that group, and you saw on that map as well that I said that there were only about 4 animals down there. So we are at this time not we don't have a lot of confidence, or I don't want to say confidence in the numbers down there. Um, there was a female from the Bayam Sale pack from the first year's litter, 2023, that dispersed down there and was caught and collared, and so that is the only collar that's down there. Is now a Bayam Sale animal. So you do have different genetics. You know, there's a different female that's down there. Um, but yeah, that is something. We are at the very tip of the dispersal pattern for wolves coming out of the northern Rockies and Oregon, and so we that is something that we will likely continue to encounter. Is um, you saw the map. We're at the very long finger of this dispersal, and so genetics is something that is key and that we monitor. But at this time, we continue to have new males and females come from Oregon that bring new haploid types into the northern portion of the population. And we continue to see wolves travel even just a handful at a time. The fact that, wolves are popping up in southern Sierra and meeting up with that other group is a fact that there obviously is connection. So it's not an issue at this time, but it's something that we monitor.
Okay. Next question. Are people asked to have riders and other measures to protect their livestock on public land, so ranchers? And how does wolf livestock conflict in California compare to other states?
Yeah. So they required? No. I mean, we do. It is something that the state is promoting. It's when it comes to an individual business operation, it's a difficult place for the state to be like, you have to do this thing. We do recommend that. We do have a variety of tools that the state owns and gives out for free, like turbo flattery. We have some fox lights and rag boxes, a variety of the initial non-lethal techniques that can be proven to be useful. There's no silver bullet when it comes to livestock conflict deterrence. Wolves can be quite flighty. They're very smart to new things occurring on the landscape. And so, if from the beginning you can keep things going and keep changing it up, it is possible that you can deter conflict. But on the other side, if you also have vulnerable livestock, if you're calving in a certain area, I don't want to go into all the details of that, but you need to harden and reduce vulnerability, increase deterrence and reduce vulnerability at the same time. And so, yeah, on open landscapes, it's the hardest. Out on open allotments, you're working with thousands of acres, sometimes more. And yeah, that's not something that, a lot of the livestock producers in California obviously were not here 100 years ago individually. Their families might have been, but they are not currently set up for thinking about dealing with wolves, and many of them have only been dealing with wolves for one season already. And so to make those business changes is quite difficult. I fully acknowledge that, and that's one reason that I'm a huge proponent of the compensation program being fully funded, so that we can help folks get the resources that they need to implement all the tools that we suggest in others. And then the second part of that question: how does conflict compare? Um, it is significantly higher in California. And I think that is because of a couple things. One is that we are the only state that is fully protected. Oregon and Washington, they're sort of split, where the most eastern third of the state is delisted. And so wolves are removed relatively easily when it comes to conflict. Like the threshold is sometimes, killing 4 cattle or 4 livestock within a number of weeks, sometimes months. If we went by that same standard, we would probably have to remove every pack or nearly every pack. And so that's one thing that we see here, is that there's quite a lot of conflict. The other thing is that we just simply don't have the same prey base as other states. If you look at Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, I mean, we have fewer elk in all of California than there are in some individual herds in Idaho. And so the elk numbers aren't there. Obviously, we don't have moose. We don't have a variety of other species that are found in other states. Um, and then deer numbers, particularly in northeastern California where wolves occur, that's where we have some of our lowest deer numbers as well. And so that remains, yeah, probably a reason why wolves are switching to, they're prey switching. It's not that there's nothing to eat. It's just that the densities are such that, and carnivores do this. I've seen it across, I've seen it in the Serengeti, where yes, there's a million zebra, but there's more vulnerable, easier things to eat, and so they'll go after cattle. And I think we see that here as well. And that's something that some of the Berkeley work is starting to show, is this prey switching, is that once you get below a certain threshold of deer, wolves are more likely to switch over to cattle. And that's what we've seen in the initial results, is low deer densities coincide with higher livestock conflict.
Okay, thank you. And we had another question, really sort of piggybacking off of that one, wondering about strategies being planned or in place to prevent the need for lethal removal when wolves disperse and return to Sierra Valley potentially. And wondering if there's work being done. You mentioned those prey population dynamics, and wondering about improving deer habitat and the impact on wolves there.
Yeah, I'll go backwards from that one. So improving like native prey numbers is critical. Like it needs to be part of our thinking. Um, at the same time, that like even if I did this today and like made all deer habitat perfect, it's still going to take probably at least a generation. Like that is not something that will happen in quickly. And the reality is that a lot of it is going to take investment on private land. It's going to take it needs to happen at the landscape level. At just the state agency doing deer restoration projects on state land is not going to be enough. And so it needs to happen at a larger level. And obviously, there's a variety of factors that go into that. But the point is, it needs to be something that we work on, but it's definitely not something that is going to be a short-term fix by any means. And so, yes, the more short-term stuff is working with communities to, try to harden landscapes, try to harden livestock operations, and also try to, uh, we're working with most of the counties right now on seeing if we can have sheriff's departments or the USDA, have agreements for drone contracts and contracts for hazing techniques with the sheriff's office. So there's things like that that we can work on, but it is very difficult. It's not just wolves. It is very difficult to get a carnivore off to stop to actually say like, could you please go eat this and not that? Um, and that was just with a handful of wolves. You know, when we're dealing with this on multiple packs in multiple areas, it is going to be immensely resource heavy. And right now, I mean, you saw the numbers that we have for compensation. Um, those are not the numbers that we have internally. You know, for wolf staff from our agency, we have 3 full-time staff, myself being one of them. And so this is something that, yeah, I think whether it's an increase in, like I said, all stakeholders at all levels being more involved, um, not just the ranchers themselves, but the communities and the Californians. The vast majority of the Californians will never see, hear, or get to experience the presence of a wolf, let alone the conflict with wolves. And so I think, you know, getting more of California involved in this issue, there's a lot of people that care about wolves. I think that, you know, if we could get a lot of those people to work in the direction of this main critical issue, I don't know. I would be more than welcome to help foster those conversations. So
All right. We're getting towards the top of the hour. So we have one last question. And that is, what does success look like for the state wolf conservation program? Is there a population number that is part of that vision?
yeah, this is a this is another key issue that needs to be addressed. Is I mentioned our wolf conservation plan was written shortly after OR7 came down. That was before we even had a pack. And so there were no recovery goals set in place. And so that is something that is frustrating to people on all sides of the issue. And so I think that that's something that I personally would love to address. And I think that we do need a recovery plan in place that sets key objectives for where we're going. What does a sustainable population look like? Sustainable population means a variety of things. It doesn't just mean ecologically sustainable. It means what makes sense in the context of the 21st century in California, where there's 40 million people and a lot of livestock. And so I think we need to have some very truthful and realistic conversations around that. And yeah, it's not a species like the black bear where, you know, there can be 65,000 of them. And yes, there's a little bit of conflict, but by and large, you know, we're able to largely coexist with bears with some easy tools. With wolves, yeah, wolves bring change, and that's probably why they're so difficult to work in and to work with. Um, Fascinating creatures. I enjoy working with them, but it has definitely been the most challenging carnivore species I've worked with uh, on 3 continents now. So yeah,
Okay, well, Axel, thank you so much for joining us today and taking the time to share your incredible work and giving us, such great answers. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. Thank you for your attention and for your great questions. Yeah, a recording of this webinar will be available shortly on our website, and it will also be emailed to all of you. To get involved and see what is happening around the Sierra and here at the Alliance, you can sign up for our newsletters and email alerts at sierranevadaalliance.org and follow us on social media. Yeah, thank you all and be on the lookout for future webinars and events coming soon. Thank you, Axel.
thank you for having me, and thanks for
Yeah.
everyone for attending.